All right, well, good morning, everyone. I am about to get on a plane here at TF Green to head down to Washington to do my part and do everything that I can to help prevent a federal government shutdown. If Congress doesn't act, we are only 5 days away from the federal government shutting down. This would be disastrous for working people in Rhode Island and all across the country. A shutdown would have devastating impacts. Military families would be left without pay. Think about that for a moment. In Rhode Island, there are men and women whose spouses are on active duty and have been deployed overseas, men and women who are raising children here at home while their spouses are serving overseas, who are not going to get their paychecks. Seniors may face delays in having their Social Security benefits processed. Here at the airport, air traffic controllers, TSA agents, people who keep Rhode Islanders safe when they fly are going to be asked to go without pay. And it's not just air traffic control and TSA. It's food inspectors, OSHA workplace safety inspectors, EPA inspectors that ensure that our air and our drinking water is safe. These are critical roles, and because of the dysfunction in Washington coming from the House Republican caucus, these working people, men and women who keep Rhode Islanders safe, are not going to be getting paychecks unless Congress acts. A government shutdown will likely mean that 8,000 Rhode Island women, children, and infants will lose support through the WIC program. Head Start for young people across Rhode Island will be defunded. And disaster response. We are not through hurricane season yet. FEMA's Disaster Relief Trust Fund is close to being depleted, and if there is a government shutdown, then that is likely to happen. The American people deserve better than this. The American people deserve better than the partisan fighting, the dysfunction, and the games that politicians in Washington are playing with people's lives. Let me be clear, this shutdown is preventable. Back in June, we reached a deal to fund the federal government. President Biden, Democrats and Republicans in the House and the Senate came together with a deal in June for funding levels for the federal government. And this is a deal that the president supports, that Democrats and Republicans in the Senate support, that Democrats in the House support, and that Republicans in the House were supporting until they decided to renege on the deal. This shutdown is preventable. If House Republicans would just honor the deal that was made with President Biden and the Democrats back in June, we wouldn't need to be talking about shutdowns. Even today, if a vote came up in Congress, an up or down vote for a clean government funding bill, it would probably pass with 300 or 350 votes. But what is happening is a small number of about a dozen extremists in the House of Representatives are playing games with people's lives and threatening a shutdown in order to push an extreme agenda. The House Republican leadership has chosen to cater to the most extreme members of their caucus rather than working across the aisle with Democrats and the president to keep the government running. Last week, the House leadership left town for a 4-day weekend without any plan to avert a shutdown. So what we need is for the Republican leadership in the House to stop listening to the small number of extremists in their caucus who are pushing for a shutdown and instead work across the aisle with Democrats, with the president, to avoid a government shutdown that would be disastrous for working people. My Democratic colleagues and I, and in fairness, many of my Republican colleagues too, are ready to reach a deal to keep the government open, but we cannot and will not sacrifice seniors and working people to the extreme demands that the Republican Chaos Caucus is pushing. So my message to my colleagues across the aisle is let's put aside the partisanship, honor the deal that was made back in June with the president to keep the government open, and work together across the aisle in a bipartisan way to prevent a shutdown. Now, if there is a government shutdown, our office will remain open to serve Rhode Island constituents. We will be taking calls, we will be doing everything that we can to connect people with the assistance and the relief that they may need. But let me be clear, it will be difficult, because while our office will be open to serve constituents, the federal agencies that we would work with normally, the Social Security Administration, the IRS, OSHA, other federal agencies may be in shutdown, and it will be difficult to get people the assistance that we normally are accustomed to providing when Rhode Islanders call us in their time of need. So we're going to do everything we can, though, to continue to serve Rhode Islanders and to work with anyone, Democrats, Republicans, the House, the Senate. I will work with anyone to help prevent this shutdown from occurring. I think it's important that we elevate the voices of the people who will be impacted if the government shuts down, because there are real-world consequences to this extreme partisanship and political infighting. And I want to be clear, this is not just a bunch of politicians arguing with each other. This is a small group of a dozen or so extremists in the House that are pushing an extreme agenda and threatening the livelihoods of millions of people in the process. And so what I want to do is make sure that we are elevating the voices of people who may be impacted so that we can put some pressure on these dozen extremists and the Speaker of the House to avoid a costly shutdown that will hurt a lot of people. The first person I would like to recognize is Matt McCoy, who is a 23-year retired Navy veteran from North Kingstown. And I'd like to ask Matt to speak a little bit about the impact that a shutdown could have on military families here in Rhode Island. Matt.
Thank you, Congressman. Good morning. My name is Matthew McCoy. I'm a retired Navy lieutenant living in North Kingstown, Rhode Island. I served in the U.S. Navy from 1980 to 2003 as both an enlisted sailor and as a commissioned officer. During my service, I experienced the adverse effects of numerous government shutdowns in the 1980s and 1990s. As someone active in the veterans community here in Rhode Island, I have seen the direct negative consequences that government shutdowns have on the military families, and veterans in our state, many of whom are employed by the federal government or rely on federal assistance programs. And for those who don't know, approximately 30% of federal employees are veterans. I watched during the 35-day government shutdown in 2018 and 2019 as my shipmates in the U.S. Coast Guard, which is part of the Department of Homeland Security, had their paychecks suspended. That shutdown affected a total of 41,000 active duty Coast Guardsmen, 6,000 reservists, and 8,500 civilian employees, including those stationed at Coast Guard facilities here in Rhode Island. I find it unfathomable that some members of Congress find it acceptable for American service members, including those forward deployed and stationed overseas, like some of our Rhode Island Army National Guard troops, to serve without pay. While it is true that they will eventually be paid when the government shutdown ends, the financial disruption to them and their families during the shutdown is totally unacceptable. Government shutdowns threaten our national security, military readiness, and greatly affect military recruiting and retention. This is because those serving in our armed forces look for stability, and if you are affected routinely by these types of events, you're less apt to join the military or stay in the military. Our service members and their families sacrifice enough and should not suffer because of preventable dysfunction in Congress. I ask both Republicans and Democrats in Congress, especially those in the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, to work together to keep our government open. I'm grateful for Congressman Magaziner's efforts to prevent a government shutdown and for his continued support of his military and veteran constituents. Thank you.
So I want to be clear, and I'll ask our next speaker to expand on this. In the event of a shutdown, one of the groups of people who could be most significantly impacted are Rhode Island seniors. While those who are already receiving Social Security benefits will likely continue to get their monthly payments, new applications for people who are retiring to begin their Social Security benefits are likely going to be delayed. And things like benefit verifications to help seniors who are looking to take out loans or buy houses or need verification for other purposes also may be impacted. This is unacceptable. This is yet another example of why we need to work together across the aisle to prevent a shutdown. And our next speaker is no stranger to people who have been following the news in Rhode Island for a number of years. We know her as a former state senator, but she is now also the new executive director of the Senior Agenda Coalition for Rhode Island, Cindy Coyne.
Thank you, Congressman. I appreciate that. On behalf of the Senior Agenda Coalition of Rhode Island, I am pleased to join Congressman Magazzina and others today to focus or discuss the potential impact on government shutdown. My focus is the impact of and on Rhode Island senior citizens. It is fiction to say that shutting down the government will have no impact, and those who play politics by advocating for a shutdown certainly know better. We are told that some of the most critical services that seniors rely upon will continue without interruption. As a result of so many automated systems, Social Security checks will continue to be processed and arrive, and there will be no disruption in Medicare payments, and I'm not sure about the claims processing at this time. And while that forecast will hopefully prove true, let's be honest, when Social Security and Medicare workers are furloughed, there will be an impact to recipients, and it will be felt quickly. Social Security and Medicare on their best days are large and very complex systems. And the people who use those systems are senior citizens and older adults with disabilities often need help navigating these systems in order to get the benefits, care, and assistance that they are entitled to. Even if basic services continue, there will be an immediate impact on those seniors and other older adults who have questions about their benefits and who need additional help or who need any type of customer service. But with the government shutdown, there may not be a customer service agent to help you. Even the most basic needs, such as replacing a Social Security card, won't even get done. And let's be realistic, nobody calls Social Security or Medicare customer service because they want to. They call customer service only because they need to in order to access these critical benefits and keep them flowing smoothly. Without the critical customer service provided by our federal government workers, questions won't get answered. But more importantly, critical services may simply not reach those who need them the most in a timely way. The bottom line, you can't close government without impacting services, and unfortunately the services our seniors count on the most are not exempt from that impact. I want to thank the Congressman for his concern and attention to this very serious matter. I know he will continue to work diligently for our seniors and other older adults. We are lucky to have him in our corner.
You know, there are a whole lot of federal agencies that keep people safe that, you know, maybe most of us don't always think about on a day-to-day basis, but they are vitally important. We've mentioned already food inspection. We've mentioned EPA, which keeps our air and water safe. Another important federal agency that keeps Rhode Islanders safe is OSHA. OSHA, as it stands today, would have to significantly curtail its activities to keep people safe on the workplace if a shutdown is to occur. So to speak about that, I would like to invite, on behalf of his members, of his organization, and across the Rhode Island building trades, from the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, Local 195, Justin Kelly.
Like the Congressman said, my name is Justin Kelly, and I am a business representative and political director for Painters and Allied Trades District Council 11, as well as here in representation of the 10,000 members of the Rhode Island Building and Construction Trades Council. Let me start by saying that, on a personal note, my father is a veteran of the United States Marine Corps and fought in the Vietnam War. It's absolutely unconscionable to me that anybody who served this country honorably in the military, either active duty or as a veteran, will be asked to go without because of political games in Washington played by people who know better. Let's talk about the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA. OSHA, as it stands, is an already overburdened agency, asked to do more than they have the capacity to achieve. Every single day, and I mean every single day, myself and my colleagues from the building trades unions walk on construction sites where lethal hazards present themselves to workers who are untrained, disrespected by their employer, and not given the opportunity to organize to prevent such hazards. We rely on federal agencies such as the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, to go out and issue guidance and enforcement so that workers are kept safe from these lethal hazards. Not only that, we rely on other federal agencies like the United States Environmental Protection Agency to ensure that the public is not put at risk of things like hazardous materials like lead and asbestos and other heavy metals. Again, it's absolutely unconscionable to me that the average taxpayer, the average working class, middle class family in this country will be asked to shoulder the burden of political games in Washington. And so we ask that the Congress take swift steps to prevent this shutdown and get serious and go do your job. And so thank you, Congressman. We appreciate you the opportunity.
Hold on. Finally, we are here at TF Green Airport, which is an important economic hub for our state, and thousands of people come through here a week relying on federal employees to keep them safe. I want to invite up the New England Legislative Chair of the National Air Traffic Controllers Association, Jamie Green, who can talk a little bit about the important work that is done here at the airport and at airports all across the country, and how it will be impacted if the House Republican leadership continues to drive us toward this unnecessary shutdown.
Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Jamie Green, and I'm an air traffic controller here at Providence. I'm also a U.S. Navy veteran. If there is one message that I want to convey to everyone here, it's this. Whenever the federal government shuts down, it weakens our aviation system. Shutdowns are damaging to our economy, the traveling public, and the lives of air traffic controllers and other aviation safety professionals. Shutdowns exasperate ongoing staffing shortages, delay training, and they defer critical maintenance and modernization projects. Like most Americans, air traffic controllers and other aviation safety professionals generally rely on their paychecks to pay the bills that take care of their families. Not knowing when they will receive their next paycheck is very stressful. During the last shutdown, many controllers began working second jobs to ensure a steady income. This led to significant stress and fatigue. Many air traffic controllers already work 6-day work weeks and mandatory overtime. Asking my dedicated colleagues to work without pay only adds to our stress and anxiety that we face on a daily basis. My husband and I are both air traffic controllers here at Providence. A government shutdown would simultaneously remove both our sources of family income. The sudden loss of income would force us to make difficult budgetary decisions to provide for our family. Air traffic control is a complex, high-consequence occupation. Many of our staff support specialists will be sent home and programs will be suspended during this shutdown. You wouldn't ask a surgeon to perform surgery without their surgical team. You shouldn't ask controllers to perform their work without their support team. Again, shutdowns are damaging and extremely harmful. It introduces unnecessary risk to our aviation system and it harms our dedicated workforce committed to protecting the flying public. We call on all members of Congress to immediately pass legislation to keep the government open. This is no time to play politics. We want to thank Congressman for having us here today. Thank you so much, sir.
So I'll end with this, and then we're happy to take questions. While the impacts of a shutdown can be dire, there is a way out of this. And the way out of this is for my colleagues in Congress to work together in a bipartisan way to keep the government open. There is no Democrat-only or Republican-only solution to preventing a shutdown. Democrats control the Senate and the White House, Republicans control the House. The only way we keep the government open is by working together across party lines. And I know from talking to my colleagues that House Democrats and most House Republicans are ready to do just that, are ready to work together to pass a continuing resolution to keep the government open. But unfortunately, the Speaker of the House right now is putting the demands of a small number of extremists in his caucus ahead of what the vast majority of Congress and the vast majority of this country wants, which is bipartisan cooperation to keep the government open. So I'm going to be getting on a plane right after this to go back to Washington to do my part to promote a bipartisan solution. And I hope that my colleagues will do the same and that the Speaker of the House will listen to us. I thank you all for coming out, and we're happy to take questions. Pat.
Congressman, on a practical note, residents of Congressional District 1 who are temporarily without a congressman, is there a staff at a CD1 office, or should they further any request to you?
Yeah, my understanding is that there is still constituent services staff working in Congressman Cicilline's former office. Also, CD1 residents can call either of the Senate offices for assistance as well.
And they just
we are not allowed, under health ethics rules, we are not allowed to offer constituent services to people outside of our district. But the Senate offices can, and my understanding is that there is still staff from Congressman Cicilline's office who are still there.
Quick question is, in your estimation, has the Speaker lost control of the Republican caucus?
You know, I think that the Speaker has miscalculated in that he has decided to cater to the whims of the dozen most extreme members of his caucus who keep moving the goalposts on him, right? So first, you know, they were demanding 30% cuts to domestic spending. Then when that wasn't enough, they were also demanding cuts to funding for Ukraine. Then they're demanding an impeachment of President Biden. And they keep moving the goalposts on him. And he keeps trying to cater to their more and more extreme demands. When what he should be doing instead, and what I think most strong leaders would do in his position, is say, you know what, forget about those dozen or so most extreme members. All the rest of us are going to work with the Democrats in a bipartisan way to get something done, which they're going to have to do eventually anyway in order to get a budget through the Senate. And so I think he has wasted a lot of time trying to cater to the dozen or so most extreme members of his caucus, when no matter what he does for them, it's never going to be enough. And the sooner he realizes that a bipartisan approach is more effective, the better for all of us.
What you characterize as the chaos caucus seems to be taking its cues from former President Trump, who essentially said on social media, shut it down. Essentially wants to burn it down. What do you say to that?
I say that people's lives and livelihoods are at stake. And the reason that former President Trump is the former president is that the American people are tired of the chaos and the division and the hyperpartisanship, and they want government to work again. And so I hope that my Republican colleagues in Congress will have the courage to listen to their constituents and to think about the people who we all work for, the American people, and will put the interests of working people ahead of a former president whose ego could do a lot of damage.
Well, you've expressed hope on a number of counts here, but they don't seem inclined to...
So here's a couple of ways that this could play out, right? One is Speaker McCarthy today, if he wanted to, could tell the dozen or so members of the Chaos Caucus, we've done enough to try to placate you, and he could go to Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and President Biden and say, at the very least, let's just do a continuing resolution to keep the government open for the next month while we work things out, right? A continuing resolution to keep the government open at the prior year spending levels for a month or 2 months in order to allow more time for negotiations on the next year's budget, right? Kevin McCarthy could do that today, and if he did that, the yes vote in the House for a continuing resolution would be overwhelming, because most Republican members want that too. If the Speaker does not have the courage to do that, another potential path is a discharge petition. So under the House rules, if a majority of House members sign a letter to the Speaker demanding a vote on a bill, he is required to bring that vote to the floor. Every Democrat has already signed a discharge petition for a continuing resolution to keep the government open. And if we can get just 5 House Republicans to join us in that discharge petition, under the House rules, it still takes a couple of weeks, so there still may be a shutdown for a few days under that scenario. But that would be another way that we could prevent an extended shutdown in order to allow more time for negotiations. That could very well be how this plays out. My understanding is that some members of the Republican caucus who are fed up with all the nonsense are seriously considering joining us in the discharge petition. I hope they do. That could be another way to get us out of this.
So Congressman, you mentioned you're getting on a plane. When you get off that plane in Washington, is that what you're going to be doing? Calling Republican members and saying, sign a discharge petition, or call Kevin McCarthy? What specifically are you going to be doing to try to get this through?
Yeah, so absolutely. Any chance that I get, I will be talking to my Republican colleagues saying, hey, you really don't want to do this. You know, every shutdown that we've had in recent memories has backfired on the Republicans when they've tried to force a shutdown. Because, by the way, we've had 4 shutdowns in the last 20 years. All 4 of them were when Republicans were in charge of the House. And it's always backfired on them politically. So I'll be trying to convince them that they should sign the discharge petition. But the other thing that we're doing, to be blunt about it, is this. I mean, elevating the voices of the people who are going to be impacted. Because one of the things that strikes me is, like, when I look at the quote-unquote Chaos Caucus members who seem most eager for a shutdown, you know, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes and Matt Gaetzes and Eli Cranes and people like that, almost none of them were in Congress for the last shutdown. And I think they're going to be in for a rude awakening when they have military families from their districts who start calling their offices saying, hey, where's our paycheck? And when they get calls from people at the airport saying, we're really worried because our air traffic controllers are having to do Uber shifts and are working without any sleep. Like, I think they're going to be in for a rude awakening. And so, yes, part of what I'm doing is talking directly to my House Republican colleagues, particularly some of the freshmen and particularly some of the Republicans from more moderate districts. But I'm also going to continue to do my part to elevate the voices of the people who will be impacted, because I think ultimately it's the voices of the people who will be impacted that are going to convince the Republicans that this is not the right move for them to make. Yeah.
So you mentioned a few times, Representative, that there's a lot of essentially Republican discontent as well from Republican members of the House. What have you heard in terms of stuff from either from staffers or from Republican members across the aisle that you've heard from just in terms of discontent?
I think that the discharge petition scenario seemed very unlikely 2 weeks ago, but now is becoming more of a real scenario. And there are, I know, at least a half a dozen House Republicans who are actively considering that. Other than that, I mean, it's been a lot of just sort of general grumbling that, the more moderate members of the House Republican caucus see the most extreme dozen or so members of the House Republican caucus always seem to get everything they want every single time, and they're just getting fed up with it. Whether they have the guts to actually stand up and do anything about it is the big question here, and hopefully they will.
One quick question, slightly on a different topic as well. Last Friday there were corruption allegations that came out against Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey. a lot of your colleagues have called on him to resign. What's your take on the situation?
You know, I don't know Senator Menendez, I've never met him, but the allegations certainly seem damning, and I don't know how he can continue to be an effective member of the Senate with those kinds of allegations hanging over his head. So if I were him, I would seriously consider stepping aside so that the people of New Jersey can be served by someone who does not have that kind of a cloud over them.
Would you ask that he resign?
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially what I'm saying.
Thanks.
All right, well, thank you all very much, appreciate it, and thank you guys.
Well done, Mike.